Hello! Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and adventures. Tonight, we're diving deep into the theories, predictions, and wild speculation surrounding Stranger Things. Season 5, Volumes 2 and 3. I'll be covering all the biggest character theories, plot predictions, and how this whole crazy journey might actually end. But there's definitely more to come after we see what the Duffer Brothers have actually planned for us. So if you're not caught up yet, Volume 1 of the final season dropped on November 26th, and it left us on some absolutely massive cliffhangers. We've got 4 episodes down, 3 more coming on Christmas Day for Volume 2, and then the epic 2-hour finale dropping on New Year's Eve. That's right, we're getting the conclusion to 9 years of Stranger Things spread across the holidays, which is both exciting and slightly stressful, if you ask me. Now, I want to be clear up front. Everything I'm covering tonight is pure theory and speculation territory. We're having fun with predictions based on what we know from Volume 1, hints from the Duffer Brothers, connections to the first Shadow Broadway play, and loads of fan theories floating around the internet. Some of this might be spot on, some of it might be completely wrong, and honestly, that's part of the fun. We're all just trying to piece together how this story ends before we actually get to see it unfold. Tonight we'll explore what might happen to Will now that he's got proper powers, how Max and Holly might escape from Vecna's mind prison, what role Carly plays in the final battle, character death predictions that are keeping everyone up at night, and those wild theories about the Upside Down's true nature. Plenty to get talking about, but if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, grab your blanket, maybe some hot chocolate, settle in for some proper speculation, and let's begin. So before we dive into the theories, let's talk a bit about where Volume 1 actually left us, because Episode 4 ended on some absolutely massive cliffhangers. If you haven't watched it yet, obviously spoilers ahead. But also, what are you doing here watching theory videos before finishing the episodes? The biggest reveal, and I mean the absolute game changer, is that Will Byers has proper telekinetic powers now. Not just the neck tingles or the upside down connection he's had since Season 1, but actual full-on, Vecna-style mind powers that let him control Demogorgons. At the end of Episode 4, Will's literally snapping these creatures apart mid-air to save Lucas and his friends from getting torn to pieces. It's this massive full-circle moment where the kid who's been the victim for 5 seasons finally gets to fight back. And we finally learned why Vecna took Will in the first place, all the way back in 1983. Vecna reveals that he needs 12 children to act as what he calls perfect vessels, kids who are weak in mind and easy to break and control so he can use them to reshape the world. Whatever that means. Will was his first test subject, the proof of concept that showed Vecna this whole plan could actually work. That's pretty dark when you think about it. Speaking of those 12 children, by the end of Episode 4, Vecna's managed to capture most of them during this chaotic attack on the military base. Holly Wheeler, Mike and Nancy's little sister, was taken earlier in the volume, and now there's loads more kids being dragged into the Upside Down through the walls and floors. It's genuinely terrifying stuff. But here's where it gets interesting. Max and Holly aren't in the physical Upside Down. They're trapped in Vecna's mindscape, which Holly's nicknamed Camazotz after that evil world in A Wrinkle in Time. Max has been stuck there since she died briefly at the end of Season 4, and she's been hiding in this cave that Vecna apparently can't enter. When Holly gets taken, Max finds her and explains what's actually happening, because Holly thought she was safe living in a perfect version of the Creel house with her imaginary friend, Mr. Whatsit. Turns out Mr. Whatsit is Henry Creel / Vecna, which is not great. That cave, though, Max discovered that Vecna is properly terrified of it, like genuinely scared to go near it, and we learn it's connected to his childhood in Nevada and how he first got infected by the Mind Flayer. That's going to be important, I can feel it. Oh, and remember how everyone thought the military had captured Vecna and was keeping him behind that massive steel door? Plot twist. It's not Vecna. It's Carly, also known as 8, Eleven's sister, from that season 2 episode everyone loves to skip. She's alive, unconscious, and wired into machinery like some kind of living battery. Dr. K's been using her as what she calls kryptonite to suppress Eleven's powers. So that's the whole thing. The volume ends with this absolutely cinematic moment of Vecna walking through the gate at the military base, very Darth Vader energy, and just casually turning everyone's weapons against them before grabbing Will and revealing his whole evil plan. Then Will taps into his connection with Vecna, thinks about happy memories, and boom, Demogorgon destruction. Peak Stranger. Things chaos. No notes. So with all that set up, we've got loads of theories to explore about what happens next, and some of them are properly wild. Now let's talk about the biggest reveal from Volume 1, and that's Will Byers finally having proper powers. Not just sensing when the Upside Down is nearby, but actual telekinetic abilities that let him control anything connected to Vecna's hive mind. This is massive for so many reasons. According to the Duffer Brothers, Will's powers work because he can tap into the hive mind that Vecna created. When he focuses on happy memories, like Castle Byers or his friendship with Mike, he's able to access that connection and turn it against the monsters. Matt Duffer explained in an interview that Will can manipulate anything within the hive. So Demogorgons, yes, but doors and objects, no, because they're not part of the psychic network. Which makes sense when you think about it. But here's the catch. Will's powers are entirely proximity-based. He can only use them when he's physically close to Vecna. The farther away he gets, the weaker the connection becomes. So it's not like he can just sit safely in Hawkins and remote-control Demogorgons from his living room. He's going to have to get dangerously close to the action. The reason Will has these powers at all goes back to that opening flashback in Episode 1. We finally see what actually happened when Vecna took Will in 1983, and it's properly disturbing. Vecna binds him with these fleshy tentacles that slide into his mouth, and he tells Will they're going to do beautiful things together. Basically, Vecna was experimenting on Will, pumping him full of whatever makes the hive mind work, testing to see if children could be controlled and shaped into vessels, and it worked. Will was the proof of concept. But now, 9 years later in the story's timeline, Will's figured out how to turn that connection around. Instead of being controlled, he's doing the controlling. Ross Duffer said in an interview that this was one of their earliest ideas for Season 5, asking what if Will could harness the connection and use it against the villains. They also felt it was natural to recenter the story on Will, since he was the kid who was taken in Season 1. Full circle, basically. So here's where the theories come in. A lot of fans think Will is essentially a second 11 now, and Garton Matarazzo, who plays Dustin, said in an interview that having two superpowered friends puts them on a more even playing field with Vecna. Finn Wolfhard even said we have two 11s, which is pretty badass if you ask me, but there's a darker theory floating around. Some people think Will's going to sacrifice himself to defeat Vecna. The logic is that Will's powers look almost identical to Vecna's killing technique, all that telekinetic bone-snapping stuff. And if they're that deeply connected, maybe defeating Vecna means Will goes down too. Like they're so intertwined that you can't destroy one without destroying the other. I'm not going to lie, I really hope that's not how it goes. The entire show started with Joyce trying to save her son. Having Will die at the end would be absolutely devastating and would kind of undermine the whole point. But then again, it would be a proper full-circle tragedy. There's also this theory that Will won't just help defeat Vecna, he'll actually take control of the entire Upside Down temporarily to shut it down from the inside. Imagine Will essentially becoming the new Mind Flayer for just long enough to close the gates and cut off Vecna's power source. That would be wild. Fun fact, Noah Schnapp apparently almost spoiled Will's powers in interviews before Volume 1 dropped. He kept talking about how excited he was for people to see Will's arc and calling it his holy grail moment. And some fans picked up on it, but most of us thought he just meant emotional scenes, not literal superpowers. What I love about Will finally being powerful is that it makes him crucial to the endgame instead of just the victim who needs saving. He's gone from being the damsel in distress to being, potentially, the most important weapon against Vecna. Because we need to talk about Max and Holly, who are currently trapped in Vecna's mind, which Holly has nicknamed Camazots after that world in A Wrinkle in Time. This whole storyline is properly fascinating and raises loads of questions about what's actually happening to them. So here's the setup. Max isn't dead, but she's not exactly alive in the normal sense either. After Vecna attacked her at the end of season 4, she died for a couple of minutes before 11 revived her. But when 11 tried to find Max's consciousness, there was nothing there. Her body was breathing in a coma, but Max herself was gone. Volume 1 finally shows us where she went. Max woke up inside Vecna's memories. Not the physical upside down with all the vines and decay, but inside Henry Creel's actual mind, cycling through his past like some kind of horrific mental slideshow. She's seen the day 11 blasted him into the upside down, back at Hawkins' lab. She's walked through Hawkins High in 1959 when he was a teenager. She even appeared in the Rainbow Room, where Brenner experimented on all those children. It's basically a greatest hits of Vecna's trauma, which sounds absolutely exhausting. The really interesting bit is that Max tried to escape. She almost made it too. Lucas was playing Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill next to her comatose body in the hospital, and Max could feel herself being pulled back toward the real world. But the song stopped playing, the portal closed, and Vecna chased her through his memories until she found the cave. That's where she's been hiding ever since, because for whatever reason, Vecna can't or won't enter that cave. It terrifies him. Then Holly gets taken and she ends up in the same mindscape, but Holly's experience is totally different. Vecna's created this perfect, safe version of the Creel house for her, where she can do whatever she wants and her imaginary friend, Mr. Whatsit, keeps her company. It's meant to keep her calm and compliant, while Vecna does whatever he's doing to her actual body in the upside down. Pretty sinister when you realise it's all manipulation. Max finds Holly and basically bursts her bubble, explaining that Mr. Whatsit is actually the monster. This whole place is a prison and they need to get out. Holly sees through to reality, which is good, but now they're both stuck in that cave with no clear way home. There's this whole connection to the first Shadow Broadway play that I honestly hadn't realised was so important. When Max is moving through Vecna's memories, she sees a flyer for a school production of Oklahoma with all these familiar names on it: Joyce Hopper, Karen Wheeler before she was married, Ted Wheeler and Patty Newby. But apparently, in the actual play, they never performed Oklahoma because the teens were planning to do Dark of the Moon instead, and it all went wrong. The fact that Max sees this flyer in Vecna's memories suggests it's going to be important somehow. Now for the theories. Most people think Max and Holly are going to escape in Volume 2, probably in Episode 5 or 6. The question is how. Some fans believe 11 will enter Vecna's mind psychically to pull them out, like going into a serial killer's head in that movie The Cell. Others think Max will figure out how to use the cave itself as an escape route, since it clearly has some special properties that even Vecna respects. There's also this theory that Max and Holly won't just escape, they'll bring back crucial information about Vecna's weakness. They're literally inside his memories, seeing his deepest fears and traumas. That's intel no one else has access to. If they can tell Carly about the cave, for instance, she could use her illusion powers to make Vecna confront that fear, which would weaken him significantly. What's really clever is that the Duffers have basically trapped 2 characters in Vecna's head, while also trapping roughly 10 other kids in his physical fortress. So there's going to be rescue missions happening on multiple levels, both mental and physical. It's like a heist movie, but with psychic powers and monsters. I think the saddest possibility is that Max might have to choose between staying to help Holly and the other kids escape, or saving herself first. That would be very on brand for her character, always trying to do the right thing, even when it costs her. And that brings us to one of the biggest mysteries from Volume 1, the cave that Vecna is absolutely terrified of. This feels like it's going to be super important to how everything resolves. So what is this cave exactly? According to what we learn from Max and from connections to the first Shadow Broadway play, the cave is in Nevada. Young Henry Creel wandered into it when he was a child, probably around 1959 or so, and found some kind of stolen government technology inside. While he was exploring, he got transported to Dimension X, which is basically the Upside Down, before Vecna shaped it into what we see now. That's where everything went wrong for Henry. The Mind Flayer infected him with these particles that changed him fundamentally. He came back to the real world different, corrupted, no longer fully human. The cave represents the exact moment Henry Creel stopped being Henry and started becoming Vecna. It's the source of his transformation, and apparently his biggest trauma. What's wild is that this cave still exists in Vecna's mindscape, in his memories, and he can't bring himself to enter it. Max discovered this accidentally when Vecna was chasing her through his memories. She ran into the cave and he just stopped at the entrance. He wouldn't follow her in. So she's been using it as a safe haven, the one place in his entire mind where he has no power over her. Now, theories. The most popular one, and honestly the one that makes the most sense to me, involves Carly. Remember, Carly's power is creating illusions and making people see their worst fears. If Max and Holly escape and tell everyone about the cave, Carly could use her abilities to make Vecna confront that trauma. She could create an illusion of the cave, force him to relive that moment, and while he's weakened by the psychological attack, Eleven and Will could hit him with everything they've got. It's basically using his own mind against him, which would be poetic justice considering what he's been doing to Max and Holly. There's also this theory that the cave might be the key to separating Vecna from the Mind Flayer. If the cave is where the Mind Flayer first infected Henry, maybe going back there somehow, either physically or mentally, could reverse the process. Like pulling the corruption out at its source, that would allow for a potential redemption arc for Henry Creel while still destroying Vecna as an entity. Some fans think there's something still in the cave that we haven't seen yet. Maybe the government technology Henry found is still there, or maybe there's a portal that leads somewhere important. The first Shadow play apparently goes into more detail about what Henry experienced in Dimension X, and it's hinted that he wasn't alone there. The Mind Flayer chose him specifically for some reason. Personally, I think the cave represents Henry's last moment of innocence, and that's why he can't face it. Going into that cave, he was still a kid with powers he didn't understand. Coming out, he was a monster in the making. Confronting that memory means confronting the reality that he could have been different, that there was a point where things could have gone another way. That's heavy stuff. Fun fact, the Duffers have said that understanding the Upside Down's origins is tied directly to Henry's story. So the cave and Dimension X are probably going to be explained in detail in the final episodes. This isn't just a random spooky cave, it's ground zero for everything that's happened. The cave is basically Vecna's kryptonite, and you can bet our heroes are going to figure out how to use that against him. Whether that means Carly's illusions, or physically going there, or something else entirely, it's definitely going to play a major role. Now let's cover the return of someone we haven't seen in years, and that's Carly, also known as 8, from that Season 2 episode, Everyone Loves to Hate. I know, The Lost Sister is famously the most skipped episode in the entire series, but the Duffers have just made it required viewing again. Here's what we learned in Volume 1. When Eleven and Hopper infiltrate Dr. K's facility, in the Upside Down, they're expecting to find Vecna locked behind that massive steel door. The military's been calling whatever's behind there their kryptonite, the thing that can suppress Eleven's powers. Hopper even gives this whole emotional speech about sacrificing himself to blow up Vecna, which felt very final and made me think he was actually going to die right there. But when they open the door, it's not Vecna, it's Carly, unconscious and wired into all this machinery, like she's being used as a living battery. Dr. K's been harvesting her power somehow, using her abilities to create the sonic weapons that can shut down psychic powers. That's why 11 couldn't use her abilities when they hit her with those frequencies earlier in the volume. It was all Carly's power being weaponized. Now, Carly's abilities are pretty specific. She can create incredibly realistic illusions and make people see their worst fears or deepest desires. Back in Season 2, she used this to help 11 track down the men who hurt them at Hawkins' lab, making them see things that weren't there. It's basically psychological warfare in the form of hallucinations, which is honestly terrifying when you think about it. So, theories. The biggest and most popular one is that Carly and 11 are going to team up for the final battle. 11 provides the raw telekinetic power, while Carly provides the psychological attacks. Together, they'd be absolutely unstoppable. Some fans are calling it the sister team-up we've been waiting for since Season 2. But here's where it gets really interesting. If Max and Holly manage to tell everyone about Vecna's fear of the cave, Carly becomes the perfect weapon. She can make Vecna see the cave, force him to confront that childhood trauma, and while he's mentally weakened and distracted, 11 and Will can destroy him physically. It's the ultimate coordinated attack, hitting him on multiple levels at once. There's also this theory that Carly might be the key to rescuing the kids from Camazotz. If she can create illusions in the real world, maybe she can navigate Vecna's mindscape and pull people out. Or she could create illusions that confuse Vecna about what's real and what's not, buying time for Max and Holly to escape on their own. Some fans think there are more numbers out there, more of Brenner's experimental children who survived, and that they'll all unite for the finale. 11, 8, and maybe others we haven't met yet, all coming together to take down the monster that Brenner's experiments indirectly created. That would be poetic in a really dark way. I honestly think bringing Carly back was a brilliant move. The Duffers have been planning this ending for years, so the fact that they introduced her way back in Season 2 means she was always meant to be part of the endgame. People complained about that episode feeling disconnected from the main story, but now we know it was set up for the finale. What I'm most curious about is how Carly's been surviving all this time and how Dr. K found her. Those are questions that hopefully get answered in Volume 2. Because let's talk about Dr. K and what she's really up to. Because Linda Hamilton didn't come out of retirement just to play a simple government scientist. There's definitely more going on with her character than we've seen so far. Dr. K is running that whole facility in the Upside Down, the one with the greenhouse full of weird plants and the massive vault that everyone thought contained Vecna. She's got military backing, loads of resources, and she's been conducting experiments that even the higher-ups don't seem to fully understand. The sonic weapons that can shut down psychic abilities, the whole operation of trying to capture 11, using Carly as some kind of organic power source, it's all her doing. What we don't know yet is why. Is she trying to weaponize upside-down powers for the government? Is she trying to find a way to close the gates permanently? Is she working on some kind of super soldier program using the kids' abilities? The show hasn't given us her full motivation yet, which makes her properly unpredictable. There's this theory that Dr. K is actually connected to Brenner's original program at Hawkins' lab. She might have worked with him, or studied his research, or even been one of his colleagues who disagreed with his methods. That would explain how she knows so much about the numbered children and how to suppress their powers. She's basically picked up where Brenner left off, but with military funding and no ethical oversight. But here's where it gets interesting. Some fans think Dr. K might actually end up helping defeat Vecna. Not because she's good, but because Vecna represents a threat to her research and her goals. Like a reluctant ally situation where she teams up with 11 and the others purely out of self-interest. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, basically. The sonic weapon technology she's developed could be crucial in the final battle. If it can temporarily shut down Eleven's powers, it might be able to disrupt Vecna's connection to the hive mind as well. Imagine if they could use those frequencies to cut off his control over the Demogorgons or break his hold on the kids he's captured. That would level the playing field significantly. There's also this darker theory that Dr. K is trying to create her own, controlled version of the Upside Down. Using Kali to generate illusions, studying the plants and creatures, mapping out the dimension, she might be attempting to harness it as a weapon or resource, which is absolutely mental when you think about how dangerous that would be. I honestly can't tell if she's meant to be a villain or just someone with questionable methods working toward a similar goal. She's giving very Terminator energy, very no-nonsense and ruthless, but not necessarily evil. More like she's willing to do whatever it takes to achieve her objective, even if that means using people like Kali as tools. What I think is most likely is that Dr. K will be forced to choose sides in Volume 2. Either she helps our heroes and provides them with the technology and knowledge they need, or she becomes another obstacle they have to overcome while also dealing with Vecna. My money's on reluctant ally, honestly, because having her turn into a full villain this late in the game would feel like a distraction from the main threat. And that's the Mind Flayer, which we need to talk about because there's this massive theory floating around that Vecna isn't actually the main villain. I know that sounds wild after everything we've seen, but hear me out. Because the first Shadow Broadway play has basically changed everything we thought we knew about who's really in charge. So here's the thing. The first Shadow focuses on young Henry Creel in 1959, showing his transformation from a troubled kid with powers into the monster we know as Vecna. And according to the play, which is officially canon by the way, Henry didn't just stumble into evil on his own. The Mind Flayer corrupted him. When Henry entered that cave in Nevada and got transported to Dimension X, the Mind Flayer specifically chose him and infected him with those particles. It wasn't random. The Mind Flayer wanted Henry. This raises a huge question. Is Vecna actually in control, or is he just the Mind Flayer's puppet? Has he been following the Mind Flayer's agenda this whole time without realizing it? Because if you think about it, everything Vecna's done, opening gates, creating the hive mind, capturing children to reshape the world, it all serves the Mind Flayer's goal of spreading into our dimension. The most popular theory right now is that the Mind Flayer is the true big bad, and Vecna is going to realize he's been used. Some fans think we'll get a Henry Creel redemption arc, where he breaks free from the Mind Flayer's influence and helps the heroes destroy it. That would explain why the Duffers have spent so much time humanizing Henry and showing his backstory. They're setting up his turn. Imagine if the finale isn't 11 versus Vecna, but 11, Will, Kaylee, and Vecna all teaming up against the Mind Flayer. That would be absolutely massive and completely unexpected. It's giving very Darth Vader redemption vibes, where the villain realizes what he's become and sacrifices himself to destroy the greater evil. There's also this theory about what the Upside Down actually is. The Duffer brothers have promised we'll finally learn the truth about it in these final episodes, and they've said it's something they planned from the very beginning. Some fans think the Upside Down isn't just another dimension. It's the Mind Flayer's creation, a corrupted mirror of our world that it shaped specifically to invade Earth. Others think it's Dimension X after the Mind Flayer transformed it, using Henry as a conduit. What's really interesting is how the first Shadow implies that the Mind Flayer is this ancient cosmic entity that's been trying to break into our world for ages. Henry was just the first person it found who was powerful enough to serve as its vessel and doorway. That makes Vecna tragic rather than purely evil, which is a very different take than what most of us expected. Fun fact, the Duffers wrote a 25-page document about the Upside Down's mythology way back before Season 1 even aired. They gave it to Netflix to explain the larger plan for the series. So whatever we learn about the Mind Flayer and the Upside Down's origins, it's been part of the story from day one, not something they made up later. Now, I'm not saying I'm completely convinced by the redemption arc theory. Henry's done some absolutely horrible things, murdered children, tortured people, destroyed lives. Redemption doesn't erase that. But I do think there's a possibility that he's been manipulated by something even worse than himself, and that could complicate the final battle in really interesting ways. If the Mind Flayer is the real enemy, that also means defeating Vecna isn't enough. Our heroes would need to find a way to destroy or banish the Mind Flayer permanently, which is a much bigger challenge. It's not just about killing one powerful person, it's about stopping an ancient cosmic force that's been planning this invasion, potentially for centuries. And that's the Mind Flayer, which we need to talk about, because there's this massive theory that Vecna isn't actually the main villain. I know that sounds wild, but the first Shadow Broadway play has basically changed everything. The play focuses on young Henry Creel in 1959 and shows that the Mind Flayer corrupted him. When Henry entered that cave in Nevada and got transported to Dimension X, the Mind Flayer specifically chose him and infected him with those particles. It wasn't random. The Mind Flayer wanted Henry. So here's the question. Is Vecna actually in control, or is he the Mind Flayer's puppet? Everything Vecna's done, opening gates, creating the hive mind, capturing children, it all serves the Mind Flayer's goal of spreading into our dimension. The most popular theory is that the Mind Flayer is the true villain, and Vecna will realise he's been used. Some fans think we'll get a Henry Creel redemption arc, where he breaks free and helps the heroes destroy the Mind Flayer. That would explain why the Duffers have spent so much time humanising Henry. They're setting up his turn. Imagine if the finale isn't 11 versus Vecna, but 11, Will, Carly and Vecna all teaming up against the Mind Flayer. It's giving very Darth Vader redemption vibes, where the villain realises what he's become and sacrifices himself to destroy the greater evil. The Duffer brothers have promised we'll finally learn what the Upside Down actually is in these final episodes. Some fans think it's the Mind Flayer's creation, a corrupted mirror world it shaped to invade Earth. Others think it's Dimension X after the Mind Flayer transformed it, using Henry as a conduit. The first shadow implies that the Mind Flayer is this ancient cosmic entity that's been trying to break into our world for ages. Henry was just the first person powerful enough to serve as its vessel. That makes Vecna tragic rather than purely evil, which is a very different take. Fun fact, the Duffers wrote a 25-page document about the Upside Down's mythology before Season 1 even aired. They gave it to Netflix to explain the larger plan. So whatever we learn, it's been part of the story from day one. Now, I'm not saying I'm completely convinced by the redemption arc theory. Henry's done some absolutely horrible things. Redemption doesn't erase murder. But I do think there's a possibility he's been manipulated by something worse, and that could complicate the final battle in interesting ways. If the Mind Flayer is the real enemy, defeating Vecna isn't enough. Our heroes would need to destroy or banish the Mind Flayer permanently, which is much bigger than killing one powerful person. It's about stopping an ancient cosmic force that's been planning this invasion, potentially for centuries. Now let's talk about the topic everyone's been debating since Volume 1 dropped, and that's who might actually die in the final episodes. This is the question keeping people up at night, and the theories are all over the place. First, some context. Matt Duffer has gone on record saying, "This isn't Game of Thrones. There's no Red Wedding coming. It won't be a bloodbath where loads of main characters die for shock value." That's reassuring in one way, but also, he could be messing with us. The Duffers love subverting expectations. The most popular theory, and honestly, the one that makes the most narrative sense, is that Will sacrifices himself. The logic is pretty solid. The show started with everyone trying to save Will. Having it end with Will sacrificing himself to save everyone else would be this tragic, full circle moment. Plus, his powers in episode 4 looked almost identical to how Vecna kills people. All that telekinetic bone breaking. If Will and Vecna are that deeply connected, maybe you can't destroy one without destroying the other. There's a Reddit post that went viral pointing out that Will, using his powers to destroy the Demogorgons, looked exactly like Vecna's killing technique. And the theory is that when 11 finally defeats Vecna, Will might die as collateral damage because of their connection. That would be absolutely devastating. But loads of people disagree with this theory. As one fan pointed out, the entire show started with Joyce trying to save her son. Having all of that not matter because he just dies anyway would be a pretty disappointing ending. The whole point of Stranger Things is that love and friendship can overcome evil. Killing Will would undermine that message. Then there's 11. Some fans think she'll sacrifice herself to close the Upside Down permanently, using all her power to seal the gates and disintegrating in the process. It's very Gandalf versus the Balrog energy. The hero who's been fighting the darkness finally destroys it, but can't survive the victory. Steve and Robin are also high on people's death prediction lists. According to gambling odds from various betting sites, Robin has 9-2 odds of dying, which is pretty concerning. Steve's odds are a bit better, but he's been getting so much character development and emotional moments with Nancy that some fans think the Duffers are setting up his death to have maximum impact. There's this whole theory about the Wheeler family needing to experience loss because they've been pretty insulated from tragedy compared to everyone else. The Byers have been through hell, Hopper lost his daughter, and then supposedly died himself. Max lost Billy. Dustin lost Eddie. But the Wheelers? They've been relatively safe. Some fans think Nancy might die to finally give that family some real stakes, which would be brutal, but would make sense from a storytelling perspective. Jonathan is another candidate for sacrifice. The theory is that he'll die saving Will, his little brother, who he's always protected. That would be heartbreaking, but very in character for Jonathan. And then there's Hopper. He's already had a fake-out death in Season 3, and he had what felt like a proper goodbye speech to 11 in Episode 4 of this season. Some fans think that was foreshadowing, that Hopper's not making it to the end, but personally, I think they've already played that card. Doing it again would feel repetitive. Here's the wildest theory, though. What if no main characters die? What if the Duffers are actually subverting everyone's expectations by giving us a happy ending where the core cast survives? Stranger Things has always killed off side characters, Eddie, Bob, Barb, Alexei, but the main kids and adults have stayed alive. Maybe that pattern continues. One Reddit user said it perfectly. You can have stakes without death. Not every story needs to be a tragedy to be meaningful. And honestly, after 9 years of watching these characters struggle and suffer, maybe they deserve to survive and get their happy ending. I'm not going to lie, if Will dies, I'll be absolutely gutted. Same with Steve or Hopper or really any of them. But I also trust the Duffers to make whatever choice serves the story best, even if it destroys us emotionally. What I think is most likely is that we'll lose one major character, probably in a sacrificial moment that actually means something, and everyone else survives to rebuild their lives. Bittersweet rather than tragic. And one of the most interesting theories involves Patty Newby, a character from the first Shadow who might be Vecna's one weakness. If you haven't seen the Broadway play, this is going to sound a bit random, but stick with me because it's actually brilliant. Patty Newby is Bob Newby's sister. Remember Bob from Season 2, the Radio Shack manager who dated Joyce and died saving everyone from the Mind Flayer's demodogs? That Bob. His sister Patty was a major character in the first Shadow, and she was romantically involved with young Henry Creel back in 1959 Hawkins. According to the play, Patty and Henry had this genuine connection. She was one of the few people who saw past his weirdness and powers and actually cared about him as a person. They were planning to run away together, escape their families and Hawkins, and start fresh somewhere else. But then everything went wrong with the cave and Dimension X and the Mind Flayer's corruption, and Henry thought Patty died. Turns out she didn't die. She ran away like they'd planned. But Henry never knew that. So here's the theory. Patty Newby is the only person Henry Creel ever truly loved. If the gang can find her and bring her back to Hawkins, she might be able to reach whatever humanity is left inside Vecna. Love conquers hate, light defeats darkness, all those classic themes that Stranger Things has always been about. There's actual evidence for this in Volume 1. When Max is cycling through Vecna's memories, she sees that Oklahoma flyer at Hawkins High with all the parents' names on it. Joyce, Hopper, Karen Wheeler, Ted Wheeler, Alan Munson, who's Eddie's dad, and Patty Newby. That flyer appearing in Vecna's memories suggests he's still thinking about that time period, and specifically about those people. And Patty was the most important person to him during that era. The theory goes that if Patty appears, it could give Henry a reason to fight against the Mind Flayer's control. Maybe seeing her alive after all these years, realizing she didn't abandon him, could break through the corruption and remind him of who he used to be before everything went wrong. It's basically the power of love as the ultimate weapon. I love this theory because it's so much more interesting than just power defeating power. We've seen loads of stories where the hero physically destroys the villain. But how often do you see a story where love actually saves the villain from themselves? It's very Stranger Things energy, honestly, using emotional connections and human relationships as the thing that tips the balance. The potential problem is that we don't know if Patty's even still alive in the 1980s, or where she is, or if she'd even want to help. She might have spent the last 30 years trying to forget Henry Creel and everything that happened in Hawkins. Asking her to come back and confront the monster he became could be traumatic beyond measure. But if she does appear, if she's been cast and is showing up in Volume 2 or the finale, that would be a massive reveal. The Duffers have been really good at keeping certain casting choices secret, so it's possible she's already filmed her scenes, and we just don't know yet. Whether this theory pans out or not, I think it's telling that fans are looking for emotional solutions to the Vecna problem, rather than just assuming it'll be a straight fight. That speaks to what Stranger Things has always been about. Because let's talk about leadership and Mike Wheeler's arc, which the Duffer brothers have said is really important in these final episodes. Mike's been a bit sidelined in recent seasons, if we're being honest, but Volume 1 showed him stepping back into his original role as the planner and leader of the group. Matt Duffer said in an interview that we're going to see Mike become the leader again, but in a more confident and mature version than the kid we met in Season 1. He's not just the dungeon master planning campaigns anymore. He's someone who's been through actual life or death situations and knows how to keep people calm under pressure. In Episode 4, we saw him leading a group of kids through the Max-C facility while Demogorgons were attacking. That was vintage Mike, planning for disaster and protecting his friends. What's interesting is that Mike's always been the heart of the party in a lot of ways. He's the one who brought everyone together originally, who insisted they look for Will when everyone else thought he was dead, who believed in Eleven when she was just a scared kid with no name. Finn Wolfhard pointed out that Mike started as the dungeon master, someone who's always planning adventures and thinking 3 steps ahead, and that's exactly what they need now for the final battle. The theory about Mike's arc is that he'll be the one to come up with the actual plan to defeat Vecna. Not the powers, that's Eleven and Will, but the strategy, how to get everyone in position, when to strike, how to coordinate all the different moving pieces. It's going to be like the biggest D&D campaign he's ever run, except the stakes are real, and people can actually die. There's also his relationship with Eleven to consider. They've been solid since Season 3, but Volume 1 showed some cracks when Mike admitted he's terrified of losing her. That fear could either make him overprotective and hold Eleven back, or it could push him to trust her fully and let her do what she needs to do. I'm betting on the latter, honestly, because Mike's character growth has always been about learning to trust the people he loves. Robin and Steve's arcs are also crucial. Robin had that whole speech in Volume 1 about finding answers in yourself rather than looking to other people, which ended up being the key to Will unlocking his powers. She's basically become the emotional support of the group, the person who says the right thing at the right time. And Steve, well, Steve's been on this journey from popular jerk to babysitter to genuine hero, and wherever his arc is going, it's building to something big. Lucas has spent the entire season, so far, taking care of Max's comatose body, playing her favourite song on repeat, refusing to give up on her. When she finally comes back, if she comes back, that reunion is going to be absolutely emotional. Dustin's been doing the science side of things, figuring out how the Upside Down works and where Vecna's fortress is located, and Nancy's caught between her past with Steve and her present with Jonathan, though honestly, I think she's going to choose neither and focus on the mission. What I love about all these character arcs is that they're building toward everyone bringing their specific strengths to the final battle. Mike plans, Eleven and Will provide the power, Robin provides the emotional intelligence, Steve brings the courage, Lucas shows the loyalty, Dustin handles the technical stuff, and Nancy brings the determination. Everyone matters. Everyone's crucial. That's very Stranger Things, honestly. The power of teamwork and friendship has always been the core theme. Now let's talk about how that final battle might actually go down, because 11 versus Vecna has been building since Season 4, and it's definitely not going to be a straightforward fight. The most popular theory is that it won't just be 11 against Vecna. It'll be 11, Will and Carly, all combining their powers in some kind of coordinated attack. 11 provides the raw telekinetic force. Will uses his connection to disrupt the hive mind and control the Demogorgons, and Carly creates illusions that exploit Vecna's psychological weaknesses. It's basically a three-pronged assault hitting him physically, psychically, and mentally all at once. That would explain why the Duffers brought Carly back and gave Will powers. They're setting up this trinity of psychic warriors, all products of the same twisted experiments that created Vecna in the first place. There's something poetic about using Brenner's legacy to destroy the monster that Brenner helped create, even if it was indirectly. But here's where it gets really interesting. Some fans think the battle will happen on multiple levels simultaneously. While 11 fights Vecna in the physical world, Max and Holly could be fighting him in his mindscape, and Will could be battling him through the hive mind connection. It would be this massive, reality-spanning confrontation happening in 3 different dimensions at once. With a 2-hour and 5-minute runtime for the finale, there's definitely space for that kind of complexity. There's also the music theory. Music has been crucial to fighting Vecna since Season 4, when Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill saved Max the first time. Some fans think the final battle will involve music in a major way, either as a weapon that disrupts Vecna's powers, or as a way to keep people anchored to reality while they fight him in his mindscape. Imagine if the finale has this whole sequence where everyone's playing Max's song to keep her tethered while she helps Holly and the other kids escape. The numbers theory is another big one. What if it's not just 11, 8, and the main cast? What if there are other survivors from Brenner's program, other numbers we haven't met yet, and they all come together for the finale? The idea of all these scattered, traumatized kids who've been hiding for years finally uniting to destroy their creator's legacy would be incredibly powerful. Though I'm not sure if there's time to introduce new characters this late in the game. What I think is most likely is that 11 will have to make a choice, not just whether to kill Vecna or try to save Henry, but whether to sacrifice her powers to close the Upside Down permanently. There's been hints throughout the series that 11's powers are what opened the gates in the first place. Maybe closing them requires her to give up those abilities forever. That would be bittersweet but fitting. She'd lose what makes her special, but gain the normal life she's always wanted. The cave will definitely play a role in the final confrontation. Whether Carly uses illusions of it to weaken Vecna, or they actually lure him there somehow, or it becomes a battleground, it's too important to the mythology to not factor into the climax. Plus, it's the one place we know Vecna is vulnerable. I mean, think about how epic this battle needs to be. We've been building to this for 9 years. 5 seasons, 8 years of in-universe time, countless Demogorgons and Mind Flayer encounters, all leading to this one final showdown. The Duffers have studied great series finales. They know what they're doing, and they've promised it'll be definitive. No ambiguity, no sequel bait, just a proper ending. One thing I'm certain of is that it won't just be a power contest. Stranger Things has never been about who's stronger. It's always been about heart, courage, friendship, and love. The final battle will reflect those themes. Vecna might be more powerful than any individual hero, but he's alone. Our heroes have each other, and that's always been their greatest strength. Because we're finally going to learn the truth about the Upside Down itself, which the Duffer Brothers have said has been planned for 10 years. This is the big mythology reveal that everything's been building toward. Ross Duffer confirmed in an interview that understanding what the Upside Down really is has been part of their plan since the very beginning. They wrote this 25-page document for Netflix before Season 1 even aired, breaking down the entire mythology of the alternate dimension and how it connects to everything else in the series. So whatever we learn in these final episodes isn't something they made up recently to wrap things up. It's been baked into the story from day one. So what is the Upside Down exactly? The most popular theory is that it's not actually a separate dimension that existed independently. It's Dimension X after it was corrupted and reshaped by Henry Creel when 11 blasted him there in 1979. Before Henry arrived, Dimension X was just this empty, primordial space. But when Henry got there, angry and powerful, and filled with the Mind Flayer's corruption, he transformed it into a twisted mirror of Hawkins. That would explain why the Upside Down is frozen on November 6th, 1983, the day Will was taken. It's not frozen in time randomly. That's the moment when Vecna opened his first gate from the other side, using Will as an anchor point. The Upside Down literally imprinted on Hawkins at that exact moment because that's when the connection was strongest. But there's another theory that goes even deeper. Some fans think the Upside Down is the Mind Flayer's creation, not Henry's. The Mind Flayer shaped Dimension X into the Upside Down, specifically to invade our world, and it used Henry as the architect, the conduit to make it happen. In this version, everything we've seen, the vines, the particles, the hive mind, it's all the Mind Flayer's design. Henry just thought he was in control. The first Shadow Play apparently gives us hints about what Dimension X looked like before it became the Upside Down. Fans who've seen the show describe it as this weird, empty desert with strange structures, and that shadow entity that would become the Mind Flayer. When young Henry gets transported there, it changes him on a fundamental level, fills him with particles that don't belong in our dimension. What's fascinating is the question of why the Upside Down looks like Hawkins specifically. Not just any town, but that exact town with the exact buildings and streets. The theory is that it needed a template, a blueprint to work from, and Will being taken gave it that blueprint. His memories of home, his fear and confusion somehow fed into the dimension and shaped it. There's also the mystery of the vines and the hive mind structure. Everything in the Upside Down is connected, one massive organism sharing thoughts and sensations. When one Demogorgon feels pain, they all feel it. That's not natural evolution, that's intelligent design. Someone or something created that system on purpose. Fun fact, the Duffers have confirmed that Season 5 will finally answer whether the Mind Flayer created Vecna or Vecna created the Mind Flayer. That's been one of the biggest debates in the fandom since Season 4. Some people think Henry shaped the Mind Flayer from the shadow particles in Dimension X. Others think the Mind Flayer is ancient and was just waiting for someone like Henry to use. We'll finally know which is true. I honestly think the reveal is going to be that the Upside Down is collaborative creation. The Mind Flayer provided the raw material and the corruption. Henry provided the anger and the vision, and together they built this nightmare dimension that's been threatening Hawkins ever since. Neither one could have done it alone, which is why defeating it requires both getting rid of Vecna and banishing the Mind Flayer back to wherever it came from. Understanding the Upside Down's origins will probably give our heroes the key to closing it permanently. You can't destroy something if you don't understand what it is or how it was made. And here's where things get properly weird, because there's this theory that the entire show has been a Dungeons and Dragons game all along. I know this theory is super divisive, loads of people hate it, but it's worth discussing because it keeps coming up. The basic idea is that the finale will reveal everything we've watched over 9 years has been an elaborate D&D campaign that the boys are playing. Maybe it's Mike's campaign to save Will after he went missing, or Will's campaign processing his trauma, or even something they're all playing together years later as adults, remembering their childhood adventures. The evidence for this theory is actually pretty substantial when you think about it. The show started with the boys playing D&D in Mike's basement. Every major villain, Demogorgon, Mind Flayer, Vecna, they're all classic D&D monsters. The way the story is structured, with campaigns and quests and battles, it mirrors how a D&D game would play out. Even the episode titles use D&D chapter naming conventions. Plus, there are these weird moments throughout the series where things feel a bit too convenient or narratively perfect, like they're being controlled by a dungeon master. The way weapons and solutions appear exactly when needed, the way characters seem to follow archetypal roles, it could all be explained by it being a game. Some fans love this theory because it would mean no one actually died. Barb, Bob, Eddie, Alexei, they'd all be fine in the real world. It was just their characters in the game who died. That would be emotionally satisfying in one way, turning all the tragedy into just pretend. But here's why I think this would be a bit disappointing. To be honest, revealing it's all a game would completely undermine the emotional stakes we've invested in for nearly a decade. All that fear for the characters, all those tears when people died, all the genuine terror and love and loss, it would all be fake. That feels like a betrayal of the audience's emotional investment. Plus, Stranger Things has always been about real stakes and real consequences. The show deals with actual trauma, grief, PTSD, growing up and changing. Making it all a metaphor or a game would diminish those very real themes. What's more likely, I think, is that D&D will frame the ending without negating the reality of what happened. Maybe the finale opens or closes with the kids playing D&D, mirroring their real experiences, showing how they've used the game to process their actual trauma. That would honour both the D&D framework and the real story we've been following. There's precedent for this. The show has always used D&D as a metaphor for what's happening in the real plot. When they talk about the Thessal Hydra or rolling for initiative, it's reflecting their actual situation. So maybe the finale does something similar, using the game to bookend the real story rather than replace it. I could see them doing it as a post-credits thing though. Like after the main story concludes, we get a scene of the original four boys, Mike, Will, Lucas and Dustin, years later as adults, sitting around a table playing D&D and telling stories about their Hawkins adventures. That would be a nice way to bring it full circle without making everything feel fake. Personally, I hope they don't go this route. The story's been too real and too emotionally resonant to pull a "it was all a dream" twist. But I understand why some fans find the theory appealing. So let's talk specifically about Volume 2, which drops on Christmas Day with 3 episodes that'll bridge us to the finale. We know they're episodes 5, 6 and 7, and they've got a lot of work to do to set up that massive 2-hour conclusion. Episode 5 is probably going to focus on the immediate aftermath of Volume 1's ending. Will just revealed his powers, multiple kids have been captured, Vecna's walked through the gate like he owns the place, and Eleven and Hopper have found Carly instead of Vecna. That's loads to deal with right off the bat. My prediction for episode 5 is that we'll see the rescue mission for the kids begin. Not complete, but begin. The gang will regroup, process what just happened, and start forming a plan. Eleven and Carly will have their reunion, which is going to be emotional considering they haven't seen each other since season 2. Carly's probably going to be weak and confused after being used as a battery by Dr. K, so there'll be this period where she's recovering and catching up on everything that's happened. Will's going to be processing his new abilities and probably trying to figure out how to control them better. That moment at the end of episode 4 was instinctive, born out of desperation. Now he needs to learn how to use those powers intentionally, which is going to take practice and probably some guidance. Maybe 11 helps train him, or maybe it's something he has to figure out on his own, through his connection to Vecna. Episode 6 is where I think things get really intense. This is typically when Stranger Things does its big action sequences and major character moments. I'm betting this is when Max and Holly escape from Camazotz, probably with help from the outside. Whether that's 11 entering the mindscape psychically, or Carly using illusions to confuse Vecna, something's going to crack open that prison and let them out. There's also going to be a confrontation with Dr. K, I reckon. The gang needs those sonic weapons and her knowledge about the Upside Down facility. She'll either become a reluctant ally or an obstacle they have to overcome. My money's on reluctant ally because having another villain this late would distract from Vecna. The cave is definitely going to be explored in episode 6 or 7. Whether that means someone physically goes there, or they use it as psychological warfare against Vecna through Carly's powers, it's too important not to address. Max and Holly have the intel about Vecna's fear, and once they share that information, it becomes a weapon the heroes can use. Episode 7 is the penultimate episode, which in Stranger Things tradition means it's setting up all the pieces for the finale. Think back to the Battle of Starcourt in Season 3, or Papa in Season 4. These episodes get everyone into position, reveal crucial information, and usually end on a massive cliffhanger that leads directly into the finale. My prediction is that Episode 7 will involve the Mind Flayer's true form being revealed, or at least its true intentions becoming clear. We'll learn what the Upside Down actually is, get that mythology drop the Duffers have been promising, and understand the full scope of what needs to be done to end this permanently. It's not just about killing Vecna anymore, it's about dealing with something much bigger and older. Someone important is probably going to get seriously injured in Episode 7. Not killed, but hurt badly enough that the stakes for the finale are absolutely clear. Maybe it's Hopper finally taking damage he can't shrug off, or Steve getting hurt protecting the kids, or even Nancy. The Duffers love putting characters in danger right before the finale to maximize tension. There's also probably going to be a betrayal or a shocking reveal. Dr. K might show her true colors, or we might discover that someone we trust has been compromised somehow. Stranger Things loves its twists in the penultimate episode. What I'm most excited about is seeing how all these different plot threads start weaving together. Max and Holly's escape, Will's powers, Kaylee's return, the cave, the Mind Flayer, Dr. K's technology, Vecna's plan, it's all got to converge into one coherent strategy for the finale. That's what Volume 2 needs to accomplish. Honestly, 3 episodes feels like just enough to do all that without rushing it. Volume 1 was set up, Volume 2 is escalation, and the finale is resolution. And here's what we think that 2-hour epic might look like, because at 2 hours and 5 minutes, this finale is going to be massive. That's longer than most movies, basically a feature film to close out the series. The first thing to understand about the finale is that it needs to accomplish an enormous amount. It has to defeat Vecna, deal with the Mind Flayer, close the Upside Down, resolve every character's arc, and give us a satisfying emotional conclusion to 9 years of story. That's a huge ask, but with 125 minutes, there's actually room to do it properly, without rushing. My prediction is that the finale will be structured in 3 acts, like a proper film. Act 1 will be the preparation, everyone getting into position for the final battle. Act 2 will be the battle itself, happening on multiple fronts simultaneously. And Act 3 will be the aftermath, showing us what happens to Hawkins and our characters after Vecna is defeated. The battle itself is probably going to be this massive multi-pronged attack. In the physical world, you'll have the older teens and adults fighting Demogorgons and trying to reach Vecna's fortress. In the mindscape, you'll have Max, Holly, and possibly others fighting to free the captured children from Vecna's control. And through the hive mind connection, you'll have Will trying to disrupt Vecna's power from within. It's going to be chaos, basically, but coordinated chaos. 11 and Carly working together is almost guaranteed at this point. The Duffers didn't bring Carly back just to have her sit on the sidelines. She's going to be crucial, probably using her illusion powers to exploit Vecna's psychological weaknesses while 11 hits him with telekinetic force. That sister team-up is going to be one of the highlights of the finale, I reckon. There's definitely going to be a moment where it looks like all is lost. Stranger Things always does this, the dark night of the soul moment where the heroes are beaten down and victory seems impossible. That's when someone will make a sacrifice or have a realization that turns the tide. Whether that's Will fully embracing his connection to Vecna, or someone dying to give the others a chance, or Patty Newby showing up, if that theory is correct, something will shift the momentum. I think we're going to get a time jump. Not during the main story, but in the epilogue. After Vecna is defeated and the Upside Down is closed, we'll skip forward maybe a few months, or even a year, to see how everyone's doing. Who stayed in Hawkins? Who left? Who's still together? Who's moved on? That's very common in series finales, giving the audience a glimpse of the characters' futures. The Duffers have talked about studying great series finales, specifically mentioning 6 Feet Under, Friday Night Lights, and even The Sopranos. 6 Feet Under is famous for its epilogue that shows how every character's life plays out into the future. I could see Stranger Things doing something similar, but less extensive, maybe just showing us where everyone ends up a year or two later. There's this theory that Hawkins itself will be permanently changed or even evacuated. After everything that's happened, after a military quarantine and multiple upside-down breaches, the government might decide the town is too dangerous to inhabit. That would be bittersweet. Victory against Vecna, but loss of home. Everyone would have to scatter and rebuild their lives elsewhere. Another popular theory is that closing the Upside Down requires someone to stay behind, to hold the door closed from the inside or something. That person would be stuck in the alternate dimension, forever, alive but unable to return. That's dark, but it would be a sacrifice that feels meaningful rather than just death for shock value. Fun fact, the finale is getting a theatrical release in over 500 locations across the US and Canada. It's playing on December 31st at the same time it drops on Netflix, and then running through January 1st. The Duffers have said they're excited for fans to experience the finale together in theatres, which suggests it's going to be a proper event. That's pretty special for a Netflix show. I honestly think the ending will be bittersweet rather than tragic. The Duffers have been pretty clear that this isn't Game of Thrones, we're not getting a massacre. But I also don't think everyone gets a perfect happy ending. Some characters will lose their powers, some will be physically or emotionally scarred, some might die. But the core message, that love and friendship can overcome evil, will remain intact. What I'm most curious about is the final shot of the series. Will it mirror the first shot from Season 1? Will it be the kids playing D&D one last time? Will it be an empty Hawkins, quiet and peaceful, for the first time in years? The Duffers love their symbolism, so whatever image they choose to end on will be deliberate and meaningful. One thing I'm certain of is that the finale will make us cry. Whether from joy, sadness, or both, there's no way we're getting through 125 minutes of conclusion without tears. We've been with these characters for 9 years. Saying goodbye is going to hurt. And that's that however it ends, it's going to be emotional, because Stranger Things has always been about specific themes. Understanding those themes gives us a pretty good idea of what kind of ending the Duffers are aiming for, regardless of the specific plot details. The absolute core theme of Stranger Things, the thing that's been consistent from episode 1 through everything we've seen in volume 1, is that friendship is the ultimate power. Not psychic abilities, not weapons, not military might, friendship. The party working together has always been stronger than any individual villain. Elle is powerful on her own, but she's unstoppable when her friends support her. Will survived the upside down because his friends and family refused to give up on him. Over and over, the show has reinforced that connection between people is what defeats the darkness. So the ending has to reflect that. Vecna is isolated, alone, corrupted. He pushes everyone away and controls through fear. Our heroes are the opposite. They're messy, and they argue, and they have drama, but they love each other, and they show up when it matters. That contrast is the whole point. Whatever happens in the finale, it's going to come down to the power of those relationships versus Vecna's lonely, twisted existence. Found family is another huge theme. Joyce and Hopper becoming parents to 11, Steve becoming the babysitter and surrogate big brother to the kids, Murray joining the group, Eddie's brief but meaningful inclusion. All of it speaks to this idea that family isn't just blood. The Duffers have spent 9 years building this extended found family in Hawkins, and the ending needs to honour that. Whether they all stay together or have to part ways, those bonds they formed are what define them. Then there's the theme of growing up and moving on. The show started with kids playing D&D in a basement. Now those kids are teenagers facing adult problems, making life and death decisions, dealing with trauma and loss. Growing up means losing innocence, and Stranger Things has never shied away from that reality. Mike isn't the same kid he was in Season 1. Neither is Will or Lucas or Dustin. They've been forced to mature faster than they should have. The ending is probably going to acknowledge that you can't go back to childhood, but you can carry the best parts of it forward. The friendships, the imagination, the belief in good versus evil. Those things don't have to die just because you grow up. That's the message I think the Duffers are going for. You can't stay in Hawkins forever, metaphorically speaking, but you can take Hawkins with you. Trauma and healing is a massive theme, especially in later seasons. Joyce's terror about losing her children, Hopper's grief over his daughter Sarah, Max's guilt over Billy, Eleven's abuse at Hawkins' lab, Will's PTSD from the upside down. All of this has been explored in depth. The show doesn't pretend trauma goes away or that you just power through it. It shows these characters struggling, sometimes failing, slowly healing. The ending needs to address this honestly. Defeating Vecna doesn't erase the trauma he caused. Max isn't going to be fine just because she escapes his mind prison. Will's not going to forget being connected to the hive mind. But maybe the ending can show them starting to heal, beginning to process what happened, taking the first steps toward recovery. That would be realistic and hopeful at the same time. Nostalgia and letting go is woven throughout the entire series. The show itself is nostalgic, set in the 80s, filled with references to that era's movies and music and culture. But it's also about the characters being nostalgic for simpler times, for when they were younger and things were less complicated. Will literally built Castle Byers as a place to retreat to childhood comfort, and destroying it was symbolic of him accepting that he has to move forward. I think the ending will have to deal with letting go of childhood, letting go of Hawkins as it was, letting go of the idea that things can go back to normal. But here's the thing, letting go isn't the same as forgetting. The memories and experiences still matter. They shaped who these people are. So the ending will probably be about carrying those memories forward while still moving into the future. There's this theory about the theme of love versus hate, light versus darkness, and how that might play into the ending. Vecna operates from a place of hate and anger. He hates humanity, hates his family, hates his own weakness. Everything he does comes from that darkness. Our heroes operate from love. They protect each other. They sacrifice for each other. They refuse to abandon each other. If the ending comes down to Patty reaching Henry through love, or 11 choosing compassion over vengeance, or the power of friendship literally breaking Vecna's hold, it would be thematically perfect. That's very Stranger Things energy. The show has never been cynical. It's earnest and sincere about the power of love and friendship, even when that's not cool or edgy. So having the final victory come from emotional connection rather than just superior firepower would be completely in character for the series. Now, here's a slightly depressing but realistic theory about the ending. What if the most bittersweet part is that the party drifts apart? Not because they stop caring about each other, but because life takes them in different directions. Mike goes to college, Will moves away to find himself, Lucas focuses on basketball and a more normal life, Dustin pursues science. They promise to stay in touch, and they mean it. But slowly the calls become less frequent, the visits more rare. That happens to most childhood friend groups, honestly. You grow up, you move away, you develop different interests, and maintaining those connections takes work. Some people manage it, some don't. Stranger Things could end with the acknowledgement that the party won't always be as close as they are now, but that doesn't diminish what they meant to each other or what they accomplished together. Those friendships shape them even if they don't last forever. I think that ending would destroy people emotionally, but it would also be very real and very honest. And the show has never been afraid to hurt its audience with uncomfortable truths. On the flip side, there's the theory that a happy ending might actually be subversive at this point. Everyone expects death and tragedy because that's what prestige TV does now. Everyone dies, everything's dark and gritty, happy endings are considered naive. But what if Stranger Things rejects that? What if the Duffers are like, no, actually, these kids deserve to survive and be happy after everything they've been through? That would be a bold choice in its own way. Letting your heroes win without destroying them in the process. Allowing love and friendship to actually triumph without requiring ultimate sacrifice. That's becoming rarer in modern storytelling, which makes it almost radical. And it would fit with Stranger Things' whole vibe of being earnest and sincere, rather than cynical. What I think is most likely is a middle ground, a bittersweet ending where the major characters survive but are changed. Hawkins is saved but different. The Upside Down is closed but the scars remain. Our heroes win but they've lost their innocence. They're together, but they know it can't last forever. It's hopeful but realistic, satisfying but honest about the cost of victory. That feels like the Stranger Things sweet spot. Not grimdark tragedy, not fairy tale perfection, but something in between. Life is complicated and messy, and so are the endings to the stories that reflect real life. Whatever happens, the themes of friendship, love, found family, growing up, trauma, healing, and letting go will be at the centre of it. Those are what Stranger Things has always been about, and that's what the ending will honour. And here are a couple fun facts and wild theories I've come across that are definitely more speculative, but interesting to think about. Now, some of these are properly wild, so take them with a grain of salt, but that's half the fun of theory crafting. First up, the Eddie Munson return theory. Loads of fans are convinced that Eddie is somehow coming back, either as a hallucination, a memory in Vecna's mind, or even physically, if the Upside Down has some kind of resurrection properties. The evidence is mostly wishful thinking, honestly, because people loved Eddie and were gutted when he died at the end of season 4. But there have been some suspicious social media posts from Joseph Quinn that have fans wondering if he filmed something for the finale. I don't think Eddie's coming back, but I'd love to be wrong, because that character was brilliant. There's this theory about Barb appearing in Vecna's memories. Since Max saw loads of different moments from Henry's past, and Vecna killed Barb way back in season 1, maybe we'll get a glimpse of her in his mindscape. It wouldn't bring her back or anything, but it would be a nice nod to the character who became a massive fan favourite despite being in like 3 episodes. Justice for Barb and all that. Mr. Clark, the science teacher, who helped the kids in the early seasons, might actually play a crucial role in the finale according to some fans. The theory is that his knowledge of science and dimensions will be needed to understand how to close the Upside Down permanently. He's been sidelined in recent seasons, but bringing him back for one final moment of brilliance would be very Stranger Things. Plus, the actor is lovely, and everyone wants to see him again. Fun fact, Noah Schnapp apparently almost spoiled Will's powers reveal with a poster. He posted something on social media before Volume 1 dropped that had imagery that fans later realised was hinting at Will's telekinetic abilities, but most people didn't pick up on it at the time. He's also said in interviews that the final season made him more emotional than any previous season, and that Will finally gets the arc he's been waiting for, which we're definitely seeing play out. There's a theory that one of the side characters we think is normal actually has latent powers. Maybe Karen Wheeler or Ted, or even someone like Mr. Clark was part of an earlier government experiment and doesn't remember. That would be a wild twist, but I'm not sure there's time to explore it properly in the remaining episodes. Frank Darabont's coming out of retirement to direct episodes 3 and 5 is pretty significant. He directed The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, absolute classics, and he hasn't directed television in years. The Duffers convinced him because he and his wife are massive Stranger Things fans. That suggests those episodes are going to be something special, possibly containing some of the most emotional or important scenes of the finale. Linda Hamilton's casting as Dr. K was kept surprisingly quiet until pretty close to the release. She's an icon from Terminator, and the Duffers specifically wanted someone with that kind of commanding presence. There's a theory that Dr. K might be related to Brenner somehow, maybe a colleague or rival, which would explain her knowledge of the program. The government finally learning its lesson and shutting down all the experiments is a theory some fans have. After everything that's happened, after Hawkins has been nearly destroyed multiple times, maybe the powers that be will finally admit that messing with alternate dimensions and psychic children was a terrible idea. That would be satisfying but also probably unrealistic given how governments actually work. Peak fan theory territory, honestly, but that's what makes this fun. And that's that we're in for an absolutely wild ride. But let's ground ourselves for a moment and talk about what we actually know for sure. After all that speculation and theory crafting, it's worth separating confirmed facts from hopeful guessing. So here's what's actually confirmed, not just speculation. Volume 2 drops on Christmas Day, December 25th, with 3 episodes. That's episodes 5, 6 and 7. Then the finale, episode 8, arrives on New Year's Eve, December 31st. The finale is 2 hours and 5 minutes long, which has been officially confirmed by Netflix. That's longer than most Marvel movies, basically. We know for certain that Will has powers now. That's not a theory, we saw it happen. He can manipulate anything connected to Vecna's hive mind, but only when he's in proximity to Vecna. The Duffer Brothers have confirmed this in interviews, explaining exactly how his abilities work. Ross Duffer said this was one of their earliest ideas for Season 5, so it's been planned for ages. Carly is definitely back. She was behind that door in Dr. K's facility, alive, but being used by the military somehow. 11 and Hopper found her at the end of episode 4. What role she plays going forward isn't confirmed, but her return is fact. Max and Holly are trapped in Camazotz, Vecna's mindscape. That's confirmed. Max has been there since the end of Season 4, cycling through Vecna's memories. Holly was taken in Volume 1 and is being kept in a false reality where she thinks she's safe with Mr. Watsit. How they escape is speculation, but their current situation is established. Vecna needs 12 children to reshape the world. He said this directly to Will at the end of episode 4. We saw multiple kids being captured and dragged into the Upside Down. That's his confirmed plan. Whatever reshaping the world actually means hasn't been explained yet. The cave in Vecna's memories is real, and he's afraid of it. Max confirmed this when explaining her situation to Holly. Why he's afraid and what the cave represents is connected to the first shadow play and his childhood. But the fear itself is established fact. The Duffer Brothers have confirmed we'll learn what the Upside Down really is in these final episodes. They've said it's something they've known since the beginning, and that it's been planned for 10 years. What the actual answer is remains to be seen, but we're definitely getting that reveal. This is the definitive ending. There's no season 6, no sequel series with the main cast. The Duffers have been very clear about this. Whatever happens on December 31st is the conclusion to this story. There are spin-offs planned set in the Stranger Things universe, but they won't continue the main storyline. The finale is getting a theatrical release in over 500 locations across the US and Canada. Tickets are on sale now. Apparently, they've been selling quite well. It runs on December 31st at the same time it drops on Netflix and continues through January 1st. That's pretty special for a streaming show. Apparently, the Duffers have been very careful about spoilers. The cast didn't know how things ended until the final table read in September 2024. They've kept things locked down tight, which is why most of what we're discussing tonight is theory rather than leaked information. So that's the foundation of actual facts we're building our theories on. Everything else is educated guessing based on themes, patterns, and hints. And that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's video. I know we've covered a lot of ground tonight, loads of theories and predictions and wild speculation about what might happen in these final 4 episodes. Some of it will probably be spot on, some of it will be completely wrong, and honestly, that's part of the fun. We're all just trying to piece together how this story ends before we actually get to see it unfold, and there's something special about that shared experience of theorizing and guessing together. The beautiful thing is we won't have to wait long to find out what actually happens. Christmas Day is just around the corner, and then New Year's Eve after that. We're talking weeks, not months or years. After waiting 3 years between Season 4 and Season 5, a few more weeks is nothing. Though I'm not going to lie, it's going to feel like forever. In a future video, I'm definitely going to do a full breakdown of Volume 2 once those 3 episodes drop on Christmas. We'll go through what actually happened versus what we predicted, analyse any new revelations, and update our theories for the finale. And then after December 31st, after we've all watched that 2-hour conclusion together, I'll do a comprehensive analysis of how it all ended and what it meant. There's going to be so much to unpack. I honestly can't believe we're finally here. Stranger Things premiered in July 2016, nearly a decade ago. I remember watching that first season and being completely blown away by how good it was. How it captured that 80s Spielberg energy while still feeling fresh and original. And now, 9 years later, we're watching the final chapter. That's wild when you think about it. This show has been such a huge part of pop culture for so long. It's influenced loads of other series, brought back 80s nostalgia in a massive way, made stars out of its young cast and given us characters and moments we'll remember for years. The kids riding bikes with 11 on the back. Hopper's letter to 11. Should I stay or should I go playing while Joyce sets up Christmas lights? Dustin and Steve's friendship. Max running from Vecna while Kate Bush plays. There are so many iconic moments. And whatever happens in these final episodes, whether our theories are right or wrong, whether we get the ending we want or something completely different, it's been an incredible journey. The Duffers have created something really special here. A show that works on multiple levels, entertaining for casual viewers, but with enough depth and mythology for people who want to dig deeper. I could be completely wrong about everything I've said tonight. Will might not sacrifice himself. Patty Newby might not appear. The Mind Flayer might not be the true villain. Kaylee might not team up with 11. The D&D theory might actually happen. We'll find out soon enough. But regardless of how accurate my predictions are, I've enjoyed thinking through all these possibilities and sharing them with you. If you want to avoid spoilers, I'd recommend staying off social media on Christmas Day and New Year's Eve. People are going to be posting about the episodes immediately, and it's basically impossible to avoid unless you watch right when they drop. Volume 1 spoilers were everywhere within hours of release. Before I let you go, I just want to say thank you for watching these theory videos and engaging with this content. Whether you agree with my takes or think I'm completely off base, I appreciate you being here and sharing this experience. The Stranger Things community has always been brilliant, and it's been a joy to be part of it. so grab your tissues for Christmas and New Year's, because we're definitely going to need them. Stay safe, avoid spoilers if you can, and sweet dreams. We'll talk again after Volume 2 drops. Until next time.